to Successful Iranians podcast, and we've got a cracker for you today. It's the one and only Goldie Ghamari. Did I get that right?
You did. Yeah, Goldie Ghamari.
Yeah, we were practicing away from when this went live to just make sure that I got my Farsi pronunciation correct.
I like how you add the British accent to. I should start saying that from now on. Goldie Ghamari.
It's got to be done. And I've got a cup of tea as well, or chai. So
chai, there you go.
I'll just have a sip.
Christmas is over though.
Yeah, I know. It shows my age, doesn't it?
No, not at all.
These cups, these sad kind of 40 years old plus cups, which has Father Christmas.
I have a bunch of those as well.
So Goldie is someone who hit the headlines on social media. I think you had a video that went viral where you were speaking out forthrightly against Hamas. And it went viral on TikTok, it went viral on YouTube, on many social media platforms, and you amassed quite a significant following. And Goldie is a member of parliament, folks. So she doesn't just talk, she walks the walk for Ontario in Canada. I believe you got elected in June 2018. You got elected again, twice elected.
Yes.
And you're a conservative progressive, part of the Conservative Progressive Party. Progressive conservative, okay.
Yeah.
Who's raising awareness as well when it comes to Iran, when it comes to issues around Iran, the Iran Revolution, IRGC, all things like that. And on top of that, I think we have something in common, although you took it a step further, and that is you're a fully qualified lawyer. You got called to the bar in 2013, Ontario.
Yes, I'm not currently practicing. I stopped practicing when I got elected in 2018. But up until that point, I was practicing law. I was an international trade lawyer, actually. So I did a lot of import, export, subsidy dumping type stuff.
Yeah, so she took it a level further than me. I actually just did the law degree, did 3/4 of an LPC course, then decided to bail out because it wasn't for me. Much to my baba's disappointment, my dad's disappointment, still feels wounded by that. So what are we talking about?
My dad actually wanted me to be a medical doctor. So I settled for being a lawyer. The running joke with Iranians, it's like doctor, lawyer, engineer, or live on the street, right? Like those are your only options, apparently.
Absolutely. Otherwise, you're a loser, folks.
Yeah.
I'm sure he now has got his head around what you're doing because he's not only got his daughter who was doing law and now a successful politician. Love the flags, by the way, behind your backdrop.
Thank you. So I got Ontario, Canada, and Iran.
Yeah, the real flag. So those of you watching on YouTube, you'll see exactly what I mean. It's the real flag of Iran and Canada and Ontario. For those of you who don't know much about Goldie, or those of you who do but want to find out more, let's start the clock all the way back from the beginning. Tell us about your upbringing.
Sure. So my parents immigrated to Canada in 2006. I was a year old at the time. You can do the math then on how old I am currently. And the reason that they came to Canada is because they did not want to raise their family in an Islamo-fascist dictatorship. My dad actually left Iran in the 70s and went to Texas to study at Texas Southern University. He got his degree and then his master's in electrical engineering. And by the time he went back to Iran, the Islamic revolution had already happened. So it was a very different country from what he had left in the 70s. And he married my mom, tried to build a life, but it was just not for him. It was very dangerous. And at one point, what was really the turning point for him was they were driving somewhere. I was very young and they were like pulled over, and it was almost like an attempted roadside execution. They were going to there were people at gunpoint who wanted to take him away. And my mom was like, just drive, don't get out of the car. So they fled, and to this day, they still don't know why that happened. This was again during the time when the mid to late 80s, when the Islamic regime was just mass executing Iranians. So after that, he decided this is not a safe place, and they decided to immigrate to Canada. So they left everything behind, basically came to Canada with 2 suitcases, $50 in their pocket, a 1-year-old me, and built a life in Canada. But I come from very humble roots. My father is a blue-collar worker. He's an engineer, but he basically he was an electrician. And to this day, he's still an electrician. And I'm very proud of that because he built a life for his family out of nothing. And now obviously he's retired and they're successful. But what they instilled in me and later on my sister is to count your blessings and to take advantage of the opportunities that Canada gives you. Don't take anything for granted, but you live in a country where you have an opportunity to be the best person you can be. And they instilled in us the importance of being very proud Canadians. And to this day, I'm first and foremost a very proud Canadian. But at the same time, they also instilled in us the importance of remembering our Iranian heritage, our Iranian culture, our Iranian roots, and to not forget where we come from, because the Islamic regime does not represent us. And I'm a product of the public education system as well. And it's not like I went to a fancy private school or anything like that. It was basically all the public education system. And if someone had said to my father 37 years ago when they landed in Canada as landed immigrants, and the first night they spent in an apartment with no furniture, basically, because they just come here, someone had told him 37 years ago that one day his daughter is going to be an elected official in Canada, he probably would have laughed and thought it was a joke and completely unbelievable. But I think it's a testament to the Canadian dream. It's a testament to working hard, and it's a testament to being humble and wanting to give back to your community.
Fascinating. I can relate to a lot. I've come from nothing. And as like you, I've also been in the public education system, never been in private school. Some people say, oh, when I speak with people in England, it's, oh, you must have gone to private school. No, absolutely not. It's just a case of constantly trying to better yourself, trying to improve. And when you come from nothing, it makes you, it did for me, super hungry to try to achieve and really become something. And when you've got a loving home, or you've got parents behind you that believe in you or give you that kind of foundation, you can build on that. Mm-hmm. But you have to have good foundation to begin with. And as you describe that story in terms of your parents and that kind of incident, it must have been super scary as they were in Iran and everything that was going with the IRGC in the Islamic Republic. Because a lot of people made their getaway through the mountains, didn't they? Through the Kurds and stuff like that. That helped a lot to go into Iraq and other areas, and they felt like a sense of freedom.
Yeah, my parents' story is fascinating. They actually went somewhere and ended up in like Yugoslavia, and then from Yugoslavia made it over to Canada.
Yeah, so many Iranians have done that, where they've gone from one country to another country and eventually ended up in the country that they feel like, yeah, I can make a life here. And it's 8 million Iranians, approximately, in terms of forming the diaspora, that left Iran, not because they wanted to. The majority, they did so because they had to, because they wanted a sense of love, light, hope, and not a cult of misery and death. So your family comes to Canada and they've got a 1-year-old. Do you have siblings, or is it just?
I do. I have a younger sister.
Okay. So
she's an aerospace engineer, so she's the smart one in the family.
Yeah, look at that. The parents must be super proud. And it must have been so tough for your parents, because it's not just them they're thinking about. It's their little one and their family, and they're taking them to a completely foreign country, completely different culture, completely different language.
Yeah.
How was the adjustment phase that your dad went through in order to try to give you any kind of life and essentially?
So my father had no language issues because, again, he studied in university and got his master's in Texas. So for him, there was really no issue there. Plus, he was used to living outside of Iran at the time. But I do have memories of my mother in the late 80s, early 90s. Some of my oldest memories is of her writing letters by hand and sending them in the mail to Iran, and her waiting almost every day to get the letters back. And obviously it would take months, especially in the late 80s, early 90s. And this was the time, obviously before the internet, before WhatsApp, even before those international calling cards that you could buy.
Yeah, I remember that when I was dating.
Remember those like international cars?
I had
That
some
was
relationships with women abroad, and I used to get those cards. And I used to go into a phone booth and call. So, hello, I've got 60 minutes.
Yeah, and then you get the operator to tell you like
Yeah.
how much is left. Yeah. That eventually she transitioned to that to speak with her family. But even before those existed, all she had was letters, and her English was okay, but it wasn't the greatest. So I know it was definitely a harder adjustment period for her. But she's very resourceful, very smart as well. She learned English the same time that I did, basically. And when my sister was born, she stayed at home for a little bit raising us. But then as soon as my younger sister went to school, she went back to work. And now she has a very successful career as basically a social worker for a nonprofit organization. And that nonprofit helps seniors from different countries integrate into the community. And my mom, for over 10 years now, has been responsible for the Iranian branch of that. So she runs weekly program for seniors, and there's like over 100 seniors who typically come, and she provides like English classes, exercise classes, workshops, and basically helps bridge that gap for newcomer seniors to help them integrate into Canadian society. And she loves what she does.
And kudos to her. It seems from the conversations we've had away from this podcast and your Iranian heritage is very important, and you've kept it as a family. It sounds easy and an obvious statement to make, but at times when people do emigrate, or when the generations come down the line, sometimes people forget their cultural identity, especially what Iranians have gone through in the last 45 years of darkness. When, let's call it a spade, a lot of Iranians wanted to be away from that trauma and that pain. And some people saw it as shame in terms of what went on with that regime and all the stereotypes and all the labels. Some people couldn't handle it. They just couldn't handle it. And they just wanted to live their life in their new surroundings, in a new country, and not be judged or labeled. How much of that resonates with you, and how much of it being Iranian has shaped you?
Being Iranian has never shamed me. It's something I've always been very proud about. Same thing with my parents. I do recall, though, when I was younger, again, maybe 4 or 5, back when things were still so fresh and new with the hostage taking and the Islamic Revolution, there was at one point when we were somewhere in the States visiting, and it was in the southern part of the States. And I recall my dad saying to, if anyone asks, don't say that you're Iranian, say you're Mexican or Spanish or whatever. Because I think back in the late 80s, especially, there was the stigma about Iranians and what it means. And I can understand why a lot of Iranians would want to get away from that. And I think part of the reason for that is because prior to the internet and prior to social media, the Islamic regime in Iran had a monopoly over Iranians. And I've spoken about this in previous videos that I had on TikTok as well. They basically controlled the narrative. So for almost 45 years, people saw Iranians as these terrorist, flag burning, death to America, death to Israel type of people, whereas that wasn't the case at all. And it's only because of social media that the world is finally able to see what Iranians are really like. We're seeing videos coming out of Iran where people are raising the flag of Israel, for example, where people are protesting against the terrorist and illegitimate Islamic regime in Iran. We're seeing videos of the Islamic regime in Iran painting the flag of the United States and Israel on the ground, and university students are refusing to walk over them. Instead, they're walking around them, and they're filming any Iranians who step over the flag, because those are the ones who are part of the Islamic regime in Iran. Those are the ones who are pushing this forward. And I think the fact that last year, Iranian women won the Times Heroes of the Year award, I think is a testament to how far Iranians within Iran and within the diaspora have come to counter that narrative and to show people that we are not who the Islamic regime says we are, We are not the enemies of the West. We want the exact same thing. In fact, we are fighting the same enemy, and that enemy is the Islamic regime in Iran.
So true. And
am I ever wrong?
No.
I'm just teasing.
But you make some really salient points, because most people who do come in contact with Iranians see the community, see the kind of sense of what Iranians are all about. Iranians love to party. Iranians love to integrate, love to mix. They're about light. They're not about darkness. And this Islamic Republic has had that monopoly, as you mentioned, through avenues like what Iranians refer to Ayatollah BBC, or they had monopolies in terms of press and whatever it might be, because it was that one kind of tunnel vision. And let's call it a spade again. People that haven't got skin in the game, they'll look on their TV sets, they'll absorb that, and they'll feel, oh, well, right, okay. And now, as I think it goes back, especially since 2009, with the Green Movement and what happened with Neda Soltani and Twitter at that time, etc., that people's eyes were really opened in terms of being outside of the community, what Iranians were fighting for, that they've been fighting for the last 45 years against the Islamic Republic, that it doesn't represent Iran nor Iranians, that the Islamic Republic is there for themselves and hate everything about Iran and Iranians. They want it all to be done with. They don't want that kind of association. So social media, with what happened with Mahsa Amini, with more tweets being tweeted about Mahsa Amini than any other, I think it was about 125 million. At first, they wanted one tweet for every single Iranian, which was around about 85 million. The Times Award that you mentioned has enabled people that otherwise would have just listened to their radio or TV and got their usual information to think, oh, actually, these Iranians are really trying to fight and to get rid of this Islamic Republic. And I'm now looking into what Iran is all about and what makes an Iranian. Oh, by the way, look at that. They had an empire called the Persian Empire. And look at the culture. Oh, wow. They have something called Nowruz and New Year. And they have all these amazing poets and philosophers like Rumi and Ferdowsi and all of these kind of stuff where people educate. Everything comes down to education. So when it comes to the world of politics, as we fast forward, so we've talked about your upbringing, we've talked about how your parents emigrated, some of the family dynamics. What made you give up what seemingly looked like a successful law career, or you were called up to do that international trade law? Lawyers do very well for themselves. Not always the most liked people, but they do very well for themselves and are respected. To say, you know what, actually, not for me. I want to go into politics.
Initially, I wanted to work for a politician because even though I was doing international trade law, I was doing a lot of pro bono work on the side for people who couldn't afford having a lawyer, because that was my way of giving back to the community. And I found with a lot of the pro bono work that I was doing, the situation was very unfair, but the judge's hands were tied. And the judge would say, counsel or Ghamari, I feel for your client. If there's something I can do, let me know. But it almost seemed, I was getting the sense that a lot of these issues, it was like a symptom. It was like putting a Band-Aid on a wound. And I thought to myself, instead of going after the symptoms and trying to heal the symptoms, why don't I go after the root cause and try to fix that? So that's when my mind turned to, maybe I can work for a politician. Maybe I can help with legislation and policy and fix those things. I never really thought about getting into politics. And so I did some networking through people that I had known who were in politics. And initially, I did several job interviews, actually. And I did get hire or job offers by a number of politician offices. But there was one politician that I really wanted to work for at the time. And I did the interview, even though they told me that they're not hiring. But me being pushy and stubborn and Iranian, was like, no, this is what I want to do. This is where I want to have an interview. Did the interview and it was great. And then they said, we'll let you know. And then 2 weeks later, that politician announced he's not running anymore. He's not running again. So I was like, okay, so that's why they're not hiring me, is because he's not planning on running anymore. And when that announcement came out, someone who I had met through this networking reached out to me, and I still have the email, reached out to me and he said, Goldie, have you ever considered running? And that's when I stopped and I thought, it caught me off guard. And I was like, why haven't I considered running? And then I thought to myself, I'm working so hard to work for a politician. Why don't I aim higher and try to be that politician? Like, the thought had never crossed my mind, because up until that point, I wasn't political. I didn't come from a political family. I didn't have any connections. I wasn't heavily involved in politics either. But I thought to myself, you know what? This is a democracy. Why not? If the option is available to everyone, why can't I go for it? So I did. I decided to go for it. That was in 2015. And 3 years later, I got elected. And here I am.
How did that feel when you got elected?
It was surreal. It was surreal. And my father is a very stoic man, very serious, hardly shows emotion. Never seen him cry. On my election night, he cried. He was so happy. He just cried. He couldn't even contain himself. And it was, even though I was elected 5 years ago and I've been reelected as well a couple of years ago, it's still surreal to me. It's very humbling. And it really is the opportunity of a lifetime to really give back to my country and to give back to the community. And it's something that I don't ever take for granted. And it's been really great. And aside from the stuff that I do and the advocacy about Iran, just as an actual politician, I've done so much work for my riding. Like, in my first term, in the first 4 years, I got funding to build 10 brand new schools in my district alone, which is like a record. If a politician is lucky to get funding for 1 or 2 schools, public education is so important to me. I hustled and I got funding for 10. So that's one of my personal achievements and something I'm really proud of. Yeah, it's still surreal. It's still surreal. And everyone calls me Goldie. Like, I don't go around, and no one calls me Tik Ghamari, because I don't like that. I'm still regular Goldie, and I never want to forget that. I always want to remember to keep to my roots.
Yeah, the Rafael Nadal of humility and humbleness, which goes a long way. For those of you who don't know, Rafael Nadal's a tennis player, but I guess you've still been on planet Earth and you would know. In terms of, that must have been a touching moment. Your dad's, you see him crying. It's like you're going that full circle of what happened to you as a family, and you're seeing your loved one, your daughter, achieve something like that.
I think also for him, so I'm the first Iranian Canadian woman to be elected to office in Canada.
Really?
Yes.
Yeah, of course you are, because I can't think of any. No, that's amazing.
There were 3 Iranian men who were elected before me. So I was elected at the same time as another Iranian MPP, Michael Parsa. He got elected the same year as me in 2018, same party, same province. Him and I are tied for 4th place, but I'm the first Iranian Canadian woman to be elected to office in Canada. So my dad has the bragging rights on that one. And for him, it really does come full circle. And the years of hardship and being away from his family and all of that stuff. And also, I'm pretty stubborn as well, dealing with a stubborn Iranian child growing up. But yeah, it was really a full circle moment.
Yeah, using my little Farsi afarin, which means well done, for those of you listening and
Thanks,
watching.
afarin, yeah.
Yeah. I won't get any A grades when it comes to Farsi, let's put it that way.
Your first is pretty good, though.
I only know the good words and the naughty words. How did activism kick in then for Iran and highlighting about the Islamic Republic, etc.?
I've always been active in the sense of attending protests, especially since the Green Movement, 2009, 2010. My family and I, we would always attend because it was something that was very important to me. And so that activism never really went away. And even when I was elected, I would raise awareness mostly on Twitter and make posts here and there, but it never really gained any traction, especially since I'm a provincial politician in Ontario. So I'm not at the federal level. So my jurisdiction doesn't include foreign affairs or terrorism or things like that. So all of my activism is things that I do on the side, outside of my usual realm of what it is that I do as a provincial politician, a provincial member of parliament. But it was really, and I always did raise awareness here and there, and I have videos and stuff, but it was really after Mahsa Amini's murder that I became much more active. And it was solely because I posted a video about it. Okay, so let me go back a little bit. So I have to add context here. So during the pandemic, during the quarantine, when everyone was, that's when I downloaded TikTok. And initially TikTok was just a way for me to share funny videos with my friends and my family and my sister. And then there was a trend and I was like, you know what? I'm bored. I'm going to do this trend and let's see what happens. So I made this TikTok video of just some silly trend in I think it was April or May of 2020. And I immediately within 3 days, I went from maybe 20 followers to 25,000 followers.
Wow.
Yeah.
Oh.
And because people were like, oh my gosh, there's a politician on TikTok, right? So then for a couple of years, I basically used TikTok more as a personal blog. I just made jokes about politics. I explained life as a politician or things like that. Like it was very lighthearted, personal blog, behind the scenes look at politics. And people liked it. They enjoyed it. And up until Mahsa Amini's murder, I had about maybe 40,000 followers, which is pretty significant for a backbencher like me in Ontario. And even during that time, I would still make videos about Iran, but they never really gained traction. So when Mahsa Amini's murder happened, I made a video about it. And it was just a video of me attending a vigil. And that video was September 18. And it didn't get a lot of traction. And that really bothered me because for those who are not Iranian, it's really hard to understand what people in Iran are going through. It's hard to understand what the morality police is. It's hard to understand the reality that you could be walking on the street and someone can just come and drag you away and put you into a van and take you for no reason. And then God knows what they're going to do to you. They could rape you. They could torture you. They could execute you. You don't know. Like, this is the reality. And for people who have not been there or who are not familiar with that, it's not something they can grasp. And so the fact that video that I made speaking about this, not getting a lot of attention really bugged me. So I was like, you know what? I'm going to do something. I'm going to make a video. So I found a trending audio on TikTok and I made a video clip. I made a video of different video clips and it was all done on my phone. And it was basically, the first half of it was images and videos of the morality police dragging Iranian women away. And then the second half of the video was Iranian women fighting back, taking off their hijab, burning images of Khamenei or all those people. And I put that out there and it went viral. Like it had over 700,000 views and my account started blowing up and people were starting to ask questions like, what is this? Is this real? What's going on? So I made another one and another one. And then I made a video talking about the morality police. And then I made a video talking about what's happening in Iran and it blew up. And then from there, I was posting videos, maybe like at least once a day. And up until the time that I had to stop using my TikTok account about 6 months later, due to security reasons, my account went from 40,000 followers to 280,000 followers. My videos were getting millions and millions of views. My highest viewed video had 18 million views. And it was literally just footage of a girl. It's not her, but she's holding her camera. And it's like this dark alleyway. And all you hear is gunshots, like artillery, people screaming. And she's just crying, she's like crying. And that video has 18 million views. And just because of those videos, like I started getting interviews around the world. I did an interview in Croatia on Zoom or whatever. I had interviews with American news media outlets, obviously Canadian as well. And it was a very good, and I connected with a lot of other Iranian content creators who were also making videos about what was happening in Iran. And we really were, I think, helping with the comms war on that and helping to raise awareness. And so that social media part of it on TikTok really allowed me to take that into the Ontario legislature as well, where I made speeches in the Ontario legislature. I spoke about it as well. And so that activism, I was able to, even though it's not really my jurisdiction, I was still able to use my platform as an elected official to bring legitimacy to the revolution and to what people are going through. Because it's one thing for Goldie, the random Iranian person, to say something, but it's another thing for MPP Ghamari, the member of provincial parliament for the riding of Carleton in Ontario, to say this stuff, right? I find that because of that political legitimacy political platform that I have, it adds a little bit more legitimacy, a little bit more credibility to what I'm saying, because as a politician, all I have is my reputation. So I have to be very careful with what I say and how I say it. I know that was a bit of a very long.
No, absolutely fascinating. You mentioned you had to stop TikTok for security reasons.
Yeah. So with the security reasons around China and all that kind of stuff, I had to stop using it. So my account is still there. It's inactive though. So I haven't posted any videos recently, but all of my videos are still there and they're available to anyone who wants to see them. I have been trying to find a way for a replacement, but it's been hard to find a replacement. And also Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, I really mostly use for work. TikTok was what I could do outside of politics. And I still post things on Twitter and Facebook and Instagram, but not as much. Although I am finding that I'm getting a little bit more traction on Twitter or X, I should say, but it's just not the same. It's not the same, I find.
No. How did your family feel about you? You're a politician and you've been very active, very vocal against the Islamic Republic.
Obviously very concerned for my safety. It's a well-known fact among Iranians that the Islamic regime targets those who speak out. There have been foil assassination plots in Canada, in the United States. I think there was just news about Sweden, I believe, there was like two Iranian refugees who were in Sweden. And we're all familiar with those successful assassination attempts especially in the late 80s, early 90s, and even 2000s. There's the RCMP, Royal Canadian Mounted Police in Canada, and CSIS, the Canadian Secret Intelligence Service, have both come out and said that they are aware of foreign interference by the Islamic regime in Canada. They are aware that certain individuals are at risk, and so they're monitoring it. Canada has become a safe haven for the Islamic regime in Iran. It's an unfortunate truth. Even in Iran, people know that. And CBSA, Canada Border Services Agency, came out, I think about a month ago, and said that they're aware of at least 700 individuals with ties to the Islamic regime in Iran and Canada. And they're currently investigating at least 100 of those people. Scary stuff.
A lot of people blame Justin Trudeau, the Prime Minister, that he talks a good game at times, at best, if you want to be favorable. At worst, he's completely soft on the Islamic Republic and what's gone on. Would that be fair?
When the Islamic regime in Iran shot down Ukraine flight PS-752 back in January 3rd, 2020, January 8th, I should say, 2020, just a month later, Justin Trudeau was at some event and Javad Zarif, who was the Islamic regime foreign affairs minister at the time, was there. Justin Trudeau walks up to him, shakes his hand, bows his head, and he's smiling and laughing with him. It was abhorrent. It was vile, and shame on him. I'm sorry. The Islamic regime in Iran shoots down Ukraine flight PS-75, killing all 176 passengers on board, including 55 Canadians and 30 permanent residents. And a month later, you're there shaking hands with him and bowing and taking pictures. It's just, I don't even know what to say. If that was me, I would not have been shaking his hand. I would have been doing something else. But the only reason I can think of is why Justin Trudeau has not taken a stronger stance against the Islamic regime in Iran is money.
Yeah.
Money, billions of dollars are coming into the Canadian economy, or flowing in to the Canadian economy through the Islamic regime in Iran.
Yeah. Sometimes when you really think about it, it's quite disgusting, that side of politics and money. And your bravery is to be commended, because I do think a lot of people who were never active, I've always been fascinated by Iran and everything from an early age. I've said before, I left Iran, but Iran never left me. It grabbed most people. It grabbed most people like nothing that's gone on before. Mahsa Amini and Women Like Freedom, people that weren't ever political or anything like that, suddenly became activists or were doing activism. People that were worried about doing such a thing because they've got family back in Iran. They go back to Iran to visit parents, other members of their families, felt compelled to do it. It was like nothing I've ever seen in terms of the diaspora, the way it connected and how it connected was like completely unique in that sense. And it grabbed the community tremendously. What is the dream for you in terms of your career as a politician? What's the dream, Goldie? And by the way, I love that name, Goldie. Where did that come from? That's quite
It's just a nickname. When I was 13 in high school, people started calling me Goldie and it just stuck. So
I like it. Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah.
Yeah. What's the dream? Let's go back to your dream.
I think the dream is to plant a seed so the next generation can benefit from the shade and the fruit of the tree. I got into politics because I wanted to make a difference and to help people. I didn't get into it for any sort of personal aim or goal or anything like that. It's ultimately a rented seat. It's not mine. I don't deserve it. I'm only here as long as the people who I represent believe in me and have faith and trust in me to do the job and to be their voice at Queen's Park. Again, the ultimate aim for me is really to give back to my community and my country any way I can. And in a sense, that also means speaking out against the Islamic regime in Iran, because a lot of people who are not familiar with it might wonder, why is she so focused on this? This is Canada, focused on Canadian things. Well, it is a Canadian issue. It's a foreign security issue. It's a national security issue. Just a couple of days ago, a report came out that university professors or research people with PhDs, whether they're research or professors at university, are collaborating with universities in Iran on drone technology. Can you imagine that? Like PhD. And my mind was blown. Like, we have Canadian professors with PhDs who are literally collaborating on drone technology with the Islamic regime in Iran under the guise of research collaboration or whatever the case might be. And like I said, are you kidding me? Like, how? I even tweeted about this. I was like, how can someone have a PhD and yet be too stupid to realize that maybe working on drone technology with the Islamic regime in Iran is not a good thing?
It goes back to that quote. You can wake up someone who's asleep, but you can't wake up someone who's pretending to be asleep.
That's exactly it.
And that's what these people are doing.
100%.
And it's been a real issue. And so many Iranians have highlighted it from NIAC and other organizations. And
NIAC's a big one.
Yeah. Which has caused a lot of problems for Iranians because it's been a mouthpiece and utilized. What's been the hardest lessons?
I think the hardest lesson is to not take things personally, right? Because you get into something for the right reason and you're there because you want to make a difference, but people are going to hate you no matter what. Like, you can't stop that. And for me in the beginning, like when I first got elected, that was a big shock to me because I was like, you know what? I'm going to be fair. I'm going to be friendly. I'm going to be nice. And I'm just going to treat everyone the same. But it's like just right out of the bag. Like, people just hate you. Like, they just hate me for no reason. They'll take anything I say and they'll spin it. And one of the hardest lessons initially was going back and forth with people trying to explain, no, that's not what I meant. This is what I meant. And then it turns into this whole like news media outlet, like politicians said this, or it's just so really learning to have thick skin, not take things personally, and to just apologize when you have to and move on type of thing. Actually, the apologizing part, not as much, but really just not taking things personally, right? Because it's like when you're in it because you want to help people and then people view you as a bad guy, you're like, what? But yeah, I would say that would be the big one. The other big lesson I would say, or something that's been the hardest that I'm still working on, is work-life balance. Cause like I work a lot and I really don't have a social life. It's something I'm still working on, but I would say that's probably one of the hardest things.
Yeah, I did a content piece about that. What life, what work, what balance?
Yeah. Oh my gosh. Is that something you wrote?
Yeah, I did it on a social audio platform.
I'll have to go and listen to that then.
Yeah. So we talk about, as we're coming towards more the end of the podcast, what has surprised you in your career journey today?
I think what has really surprised me is the amount of people who are interested in learning more about what's happening in Iran. People who have no skin in the game, but who have been willing to open their eyes and to learn and to listen. I think the other thing that also really surprised me is the speech that I made in the Ontario legislature about Hamas.
Yeah, that went viral.
It did. And it's not something that I was expecting. So like when I rose and I made that speech, I didn't have anything written in front of me. Like I'm looking down at my desk a few times because I'm gathering my thoughts, but I didn't have anything prepared. I didn't have anything.
So you freestyled it?
Yeah.
Or you just came to your head and everything came out.
That's exactly what that's exactly what it was. Like I wanted to speak. I didn't know what I was going to say, but I knew I had to say something. And that's what came out. And I posted it and no hashtags or anything. And it went viral. And I was very surprised because again, like I'm a backbencher in Ontario and it went all around the world. So I'm actually still going through the emails that I received because I received thousands and thousands of emails from people all around the world thanking me. I received emails from Iranians thanking me for representing them and being their voice and explaining what it means to be Iranian. I got emails from people in the Jewish community thanking me. I got emails from people in Israel. I got an email from someone whose family member was one of the victims of the October 7th genocidal massacre. I got an email from someone and thanking me as well. I've received emails from various diaspora communities as well, like the Chinese community, the Indian community, any community that you can think about, thanking me for speaking about what it means to be a Canadian citizen and to live the Canadian dream. Because the experience that I've had and my family has had as immigrants, it's not unique to me and it's not unique to Iranians. It's the experience that every single immigrant family has had, whether they're immigrating from Iran, whether they immigrated 50 years ago from Poland or China or wherever. I think that's what really surprised me is how much my speech resonated with so many people from all around the world and all walks of life. And I think it really just connected us as humanity, right? At the end of the day, we're all human and we need to leave that hatred behind. And when we see that hatred, we have to call it out because if we don't do it, who will? Like it's the least common denominator is combating hatred. And the same way that I would want people to stand up and speak out on my behalf, if I'm experiencing hatred, I have that same obligation to speak up and speak out on behalf of anyone else who's experiencing hatred.
Yeah, because we're all human first. And what I love about you, you're very purpose driven. You lead and it's authentic in the way you are and how you are going about your career, your life, etc., not manufactured. I'm going to ask you a sideball type question. Do you think Iranians are the best team players in terms of Iranians working as a team? And I say that because Iranians are brilliant individually and can be brilliant for others, but are they calling a spade?
So I think one of the challenges that we have had as the Iranian community, whether in Iran or in the diaspora, is that we have been burned so many times. There have been so many people who have betrayed us, so many people who have portrayed themselves as having one intention, but then come out with a different intention. That it's in Nyack is a perfect example, for example, Nyack, and then so many other Iranians as well, that we want to be good team players, but there needs to be a level of trust, right? Let's put it this way. When I first became elected in 2018, no one knew who I was. There were people within the Iranian community who were like, oh, who is this? Is she tied with Trudeau Parsi? Is she like with the Islamic regime in Iran and all? And like, meanwhile, I was never affiliated with any Iranian group. I was never affiliated with politics. I would attend protests, but I never organized them. And so it took a while for people especially within the Iranian Canadian community, to trust me, because of course they're like, who is this random Iranian who came out of nowhere, right? What's the agenda? Where's the funding coming from? Who's pushing this type of thing? And that's fine. That's totally fine, because I would be the same way. I would be like, who's this person? But it's taken me a while. But now people have come to recognize who I am, what I stand for, what my goals are, what my connections are. And I've been very careful to always remain neutral and to always be independent and to not be associated or affiliated with any one group or individual. So having said that, I think Iranians can be good team players, but I think we also have to figure out what the proper team is. And this is where I think I'm going to get into a little bit more of a biased response, because my personal belief is that there's only one Iranian person that the Iranians inside of Iran and outside of Iran can trust to be a legitimate opposition leader against the Islamic regime in Iran. And that is Crown Prince Reza Pahlavi. Like, I personally would not trust anyone else. That's just my personal opinion. That's also the personal opinion of a lot of Iranians within Iran and around the world. There was a study done on this. I can send it to you if you haven't seen it. It's a very fascinating poll, actually. And in that poll, it shows that 80% of Iranians view Crown Prince Reza Pahlavi as the legitimate opposition. So I think if we really want to be good team, and so just to be very clear, it's not a legitimate opposition leader in the sense of he's just going to take over and be a monarchy, right? Like, I believe in democracy. In my view, I think what would be the best sort of outcome would be if, let's say, we rally around Crown Prince Reza Pahlavi as a legitimate opposition leader so that we do have a rallying point. And then after the Islamic regime is toppled and gotten rid of, then the country should have a referendum. And then in that referendum, they can determine what kind of democratic institution they want to have, whether they want to have a constitutional monarchy, whether they want to have a republic, whether they want to have something else, right? I'm pretty sure I know how that referendum is going to go because of the way the polls and stats and the general mood of people. But I do still think that it's really important to have that referendum, to have that, to see democracy in play and in power. And then after the referendum, then we could go back to constitutional monarchy. That's how I see it. But I think at this point, the only Iranian that I trust is Reza Pahlavi, Crown Prince Reza Pahlavi. And we can all be team players by rallying around the one legitimate person that we have, regardless of what type of democracy we want after the fact. Because if we all agree to, let's say, you know what, we can have a referendum and determine that later. But for now, we need to unite. I think that's the biggest challenge that Iranians are facing is how do we unite and do this? Because we have a lot of MK, we have a lot of separatists, and those people are just diluting and causing confusion within the narrative, especially for Western media.
Yeah, very powerful points. I echo what you're saying. My penultimate question, when it comes to all of these things and where you're at, what the audience really want to know, have you ever been to Iran? And would you love to go?
I have been to Iran several times. The first time I went, I was 4 years old. I was 5 years old. My mom was pregnant with my sister the first time I went. And we stayed there for 4 months and it was great. I had a little baby goat as a pet. Its name was Namaki, which means salty in English. And it was amazing. And ever since then, I've been back almost every other year. When I was younger, we would go for 4 months usually and stay for 4 months. I went to school there to experience it. Yeah, very different experience there, the school, compared to what I was used to in Canada. And the last time I went was in 2010. I went for a month to visit my grandparents. My grandfather was ill. I haven't been back since, and I cannot go back until the Islamic regime is toppled, because if I go back, they would probably just shoot me on the spot.
Yeah, unbelievable. And finally, what's next for you and how can people reach out to you? Hearing what you said, feeling inspired by what you said, what's your best contact?
My best contact is my website, goldiempp.ca. It has all my contact info there. What's next for me personally? I'm just going to continue speaking out, raising awareness. And if people want to help me spread the word and raise awareness, follow me, especially on Twitter. Follow me on social media. Help me share the videos. If you go to my TikTok account, even though it's inactive, a lot of videos there, very informative things that I've posted. And I would just ask people to just keep in mind and remember that Iranians are not the Islamic regime in Iran, and that Iranians are fighting the same fight as everyone else. And in fact, we are probably one of the most vocal diasporas out there who are speaking out against the threat of terrorism because we have lived it. We have experienced it. We know where it's coming from. We've seen how these Islamofascists and these Islamo-Marxists have ruined our country in 1979. And we don't want to see that here. We do not want to see that here. We're living in Western countries because we value secular democracies. We value Western way of living. We value the life that we have. And that's what Iran was before 1979. That's what we are fighting for. And it is such a precious thing, and it can be gone at any moment. So please just be on the alert and just be grateful for the countries that you have and always fight for your freedom and democracy.
100%. Beautifully said. Thank you ever so much, Goldie. It's been wonderful spending this hour or so with you and hearing about you, what you're doing, what you're aiming to achieve. So thank you for appearing on Successful Iranians.
Thank you, Johnny. First of all, thanks for having me on. I appreciate that. When is someone interview you? Because I want to see the Successful Iranian Johnny version.
Yeah, maybe. Watch your space, folks. Thanks so much.
All right, thanks. Take care.